All right, well, we're back. I've taken the engine off the engine stand and I've moved it onto this workbench. It was kind of a chore because of the cabinet and everything, but we got it in there, and I have decided that the flywheel is going to go on, and that's the next step we're going to do here is attach the flywheel. Once we put the flywheel, the clutch pressure plate, and the new clutch disc in, this engine will be ready to attach to the tractor bell housing. That'll be the next step. So we're working towards that, and so I thought right now we would go through the process of putting the flywheel on with the clutch plate, etc. I know there's a lot of adjusting to do and things like that, and we'll take care of that a little bit later. I got a new disc, and actually the other one was not in too bad a shape, but I just thought while I was in here I might as well replace it. So I got a new disc. Cost about $35 through Steiner's, I think. Also cleaned up the clutch plate. Now I never took this apart, and so I've just kind of done a basic cleanup on it. It was just greasy and kind of dirty, but I'm not going to replace the springs or the levers or the pins or any of that stuff. All of that looks fine, so I'm just going to put it back in the way it was. So in my manual, there's a whole lot of work to do to, a special tool and a bridge and all these things to put all these levers and springs and pins back together. And I'm avoiding all of that because I didn't take this thing apart. So it looks like it's in pretty good shape. There's no chunks out of it or anything. It's got a nice smooth surface on the back to engage the clutch plate with, and all the springs look good. So that's what I'm going to do there. And then I have the flywheel right over here. Flywheel's pretty heavy, and it has a pin that will go, there's a pin here on this end of the crankshaft, and there's a new seal right in here. Maybe you can see that. Also, there's a pilot bearing right here, and when I got the disc, I got this tool that fits in that bearing. So once we put the clutch plate on the flywheel, and it'd be the flywheel, then the disc, then the clutch plate, we'll use this tool to center all of that with the crankshaft, and then tighten this to that and that to this. So that's where we are. This is, by the way, the oil pump right here. I've already gone through that and replaced gaskets and whatever was in there. So I took care of that. Again, a new seal right here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead now and turn the camera off, and I'm going to start putting this stuff together. So I'll be back in just a minute. Right, so we're going to start off by putting the flywheel on. Again, this dog's real heavy. You sure don't want to drop it. I did inspect the gears, and they're worn, but there's no missing teeth or anything like that. So I'm going to just put it back together like it was. So the only trick here is to line up where the pin goes. And there's a fifth hole that the pin holds. So this thing only goes on one way, and it's a pretty tight fit, so you gotta kind of wobble it around to get it to go in. And let me get my rubber hammer. I'm just going to tap it. And I'm going to draw it up the rest of the way just with the bolts. And there are four of these bolts, very fine threads. I've cleaned them up and inspected the threads. They look fine. They're half-inch socket will do the trick. So there's no washers or anything. They just go directly in. And again, these are going right into the end of the crankshaft itself. Let me get my extension. Sorry, this is 9/16, I think. And these will have to be torqued. And I haven't looked to see what the torque pounds need to be, so I'll have to check on that before we finish this up. But I'll run them up right now. And of course, we'll have to torque them before we put the rest of this mechanism together, because these bolts are all behind everything. We'll see here. We're also gonna need to block the engine from turning as well, so I'll have to work on how to do that. So that's the flywheel. I'm going to come back and torque these in a few minutes. Once I figure out how to do that and block everything, I'll get back to you and we'll do the next step. Alright, we're back here with the Farmall Cub. I've got the flywheel on. We put that on yesterday. 4 bolts. And you got to somehow hold this so that it doesn't turn when you torque the bolts to 45 foot-pounds. And I've got my torque wrench set at that. I put a clamp right here that has a little edge on it that engages these teeth. That seems to work pretty well. So I'm just going to go around here and get my torque. And that's it. All right. Now the next step is going to be to put gosh, I forgot what this thing's called. The clutch mechanism on here. Now, one of the things I did when I took it off, and this was suggested in the manual, was that you mark it so that it goes back on the way it came off. And it, as you can see, there's 3 sets of 2 holes, which the bolts will go in to hold this on. And so it can go there, it can go this way, or it can go this way. And I happen to put a scratch on this device right here. Right there's a scratch that you can hopefully see. And then I had a scratch on this side, and it's right there. So this goes right over there. So we'll get one of these bolts started in the right place, and then we'll talk about torques and so forth. Okay. Actually, before we get that on, we're going to have to slide the plate in. So let me get these, couple of these bolts started, and I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, so I have a little tool that's meant to engage this lining up bearing right in here. So I've placed the disc on the clutch assembly, and I've put this centering tool just a piece of plastic that's made at all the right diameters to fit in there. I'm going to line up my mark, and then we're going to put this in. And once I engage this and push it all the way in, it kind of holds everything in place. And so that's what we're going to start with, just like that. And again, my scratch is lined up here, and so I can put some of these bolts in. So we got this thing on here, and there's some torque requirements for these bolts as well. And again, when I tighten this, it's going to compress all these levers, and it's going to, because it's squeezing the clutch disc between the clutch assembly and the flywheel. And this ensures that it's centered. So we'll get all that put together, and then we'll torque that. All right, we've got the clutch plate, the pressure plate, the new one, inserted with the spindle part of it pointing towards the rear of the tractor. We've run up these bolts, and when you do that, it's compressing all of these springs and so forth. And so now we're ready to torque these 6 bolts down. And they only torque to 20 foot-pounds, which is not much, and I might already be there. So I'm going to go ahead and torque these. And I don't know that there's any particular pattern that you need to do. Uh-oh. My thing's moving. That's okay, we might make it anyway, because 20 foot-pounds is not much. So we'll just make sure they're all where they ought to be. And that's it. I think we now have our flywheel on. And looks like everything's torqued down. We're squeezing the pressure plate, and I've centered it using the tool. This is a pretty neat tool, by the way. And when I got the pressure plate from, I think it was Steiner's, I ordered this. It was about $6 or $8, but it sure helps get the pressure plate centered onto the crankshaft, in line with the crankshaft, so that when we install this into the engine on the bell housing, it'll line up nicely with that. The shaft that goes to the transmission will line up nicely with this apparatus right here. So I think we're in good shape. The next step, I believe, is going to be attaching it to the tractor. I just have to figure out how to support the front of the tractor to make sure that we don't have any issues there. And here, as you can see, we have the new throw-out bearing in there. And what I did is I just bolted a couple of 2x6s onto the outside of the bell housing. Those are bolts that are used to hook on implements and things that go under the tractor. And I have these 2x6s on there. When I add the engine, it's going to add several hundred pounds to the front end, this side of those supports. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more supporting. And then I have to work on the front end. Also have to put the oil pan on. Got to install the head and the head gasket. I'm going to wait till the whole thing's on wheels to do that part. But once I get the engine installed, I'm going to put the oil pan on and the oil filter apparatus that goes inside the oil pan. I'll put that in, install that as well. So that's where we are today, and I'll let you go, and we'll see where we go next. Talk to you soon.